Hey guys, it's Memorizer92, and today we're finally gonna go for the last video of Lancemaster Guide. If you haven't seen my Lancemaster video, please watch that video in advance. Like I said in the previous video, the main content in this video will be engravings, and I will also cover relic gears which fits which engraving set the most, and even Argos set as well. And after the engraving, I will definitely give you guys an advice for gem and car set. Then let's get started. The first engraving set is for Climax class engraving with specialization as main and swiftness as substat. And for this build, the best engraving set for this build is going for Grudge, Keen Blunt Weapon, Cursed Doll, Climax, and Mass Increase. Then let's go over one by one. The first engraving is Grudge, and Grudge is obviously the engraving that you want to go for since it increases your damage by 20%, which is insane. And the second one is the Climax. As I told you in the first video, Climax increases the identity buff of the Lancemaster. Identity buff means whenever you switch over from red or blue stance to the other one, you get that buff, right? And Climax increases that buff. So how much does it increase it? There are so many things that I have to cover to explain this, so I will replace it with subtitle. The third engraving is Keen Blunt Weapon, and this engraving really suits well with Lancemaster because if you see the stat distribution, you don't have any crit, right? But the reason why going like this is because Lancemaster has some skills that guarantees crit, as I told you in the previous video, right? So because the fact that you have some skills that guarantees crit, Keen Blunt Weapon really, suits well with Lancemaster. Like, you don't have to care for crit rate for most of the skills. So this one is the common engraving that you definitely want to go for as a third engraving. The fourth engraving is Cursed Doll, and this engraving increases the attack by 16%, but of course it also has penalty which reduces the HP restoration by 25% at level 3. But despite the penalty, this is a very good DPS engraving because the advantage you get by having 16% of attack is really insane in Lost Ark. So you want to go for this one as fourth engraving in general. The fifth engraving is Mass Increase. Have you guys ever seen any other people who went for this? Because in KR, so far, I've never seen any other classes except Lancemaster going for this engraving. Because it says it increases your attack by 18%, which is 2% more than the Cursed Doll. But if you see the penalty, it reduces the attack speed by 10%, which is huge. The penalty is really huge. But the reason why Lancemaster can afford this is because of the identity buff. Remember guys, if you switch over from red stance to blue stance, you get attack speed increase. But you only get like 15% even though you have like level 3 of Climax, as I told you before, right? So it's like if you have 15% of attack increase, but you get minus 10%. So in conclusion, you get like 5% of increase. And you might think like this, oh, you just get increase of 5% at total then this is some kind of severe penalty. Yeah, you're right, but you forgot this. On my first video, when I covered the stat, what does the specialization do for Lancemaster? It increases the efficiency of the identity buff by a lot. If you see here, my stat, the specialization at 1700 increases the buff efficiency by like over 100%. So let me show you. I'm gonna press Z key to change over to the blue stance, and let me show you how much it will be increased for the attack speed. This is the attack speed right here. Currently, I'm on 103%, and if I press Z key with this much amount of specialization, then it becomes 133%. It's like twice more than 15%. This is crazy, right? And you guys have to know this. This attack speed, 133%, is including the penalty of this mass increase. So if I didn't have this engraving, that means it's capped to 140, which is the max attack speed that you can get in Lost Ark. So for the Lancemaster, going for a mass increase is the meta. Like in KR, actually lots of Lancemasters go for this engraving. It's not even a meme. And because of the fact that Lancemaster is the only class out of all 22 classes in KR, the cost of this engraving is really cheap. That's one of the advantage that Lancemaster can also get. I told you that when you switch over to blue stance, because of the attack speed buff, it compensates the penalty of mass increase, right? Then what if you change from switch over from blue stance to red stance, right? Because red stance doesn't give you any attack speed buff, which means you will have this much slow attack speed when you're in red stance. But actually, it doesn't matter much because for this build, you only use like 2 kinds of DPS skills, which means it will not matter that much when compared to the blue stance, because blue stance you have to use like 5 skills that are mastered in over like level 10. But for red skills, for me I use like this one and this one at level 12 right here. This one and this one. So relatively, the penalty of attack speed by 10% really doesn't matter, even for the red stance as well. For the 5th engraving, there are some people who go for another engraving instead of going for mass increase. That is Raid Captain right here. What this engraving do is that it increases 45% of the increased amount of movement speed for the damage. So what this means is that in Lost Ark, you can cap your movement speed to 140. So 45% from the 40% is 18%. So if you're capped in movement speed, you get 18% of damage increase, which is a large number. So for the 5th engraving, you can choose Raid Captain instead of the mass increase. But the problem of going for a Raid Captain is that basically you can get the max efficiency of this engraving when your movement speed is capped at 140. But for Lancemaster, the only way to cap the movement speed is when you switch over from the blue stance to the red stance, because red stance is the stance that gets the movement speed buff, right? So let me show you. Right here, this is the current movement speed, and if I change from blue stance to the red stance, then it becomes 140. It gets capped easily. So you basically can get the max efficiency of Raid Captain, but only when you switch over from blue to red stance. Which means, if you think in opposite way, if you switch from the red stance to blue stance, it stays on your basic movement speed. So you don't get any buff. Like, you do get buff from this much amount, but like for me, if you see here, it's like 110, right? So getting 45% of 10% is like 4.5% of damage increase. That's really small, right? So if you're in blue stance, you get like 4.5% of increase, whereas you get 18% when you switch to the red stance. So it's not efficient in the blue stance. That's what I'm trying to say if you go for raid captain. So when it comes to total DPS, mass increase is stronger than raid captain as the 5th engraving. The relic gear set that you want to go for this build is the nightmare set. And what the nightmare set do is that if you're high in mana, then it gives you insane amount of damage bonus. And if you're low in mana, then instead of having the damage bonus, it gives you insane amount of cooldown reduction and attack speed and movement speed as well. And that really suits this build. The gear level when you get the access to the relic gear is 14, 15. So before that, you will not be able to have relic gear, right? So for those of you who are having the Argos set, I recommend you guys to have the Argos set that increases crit damage, not the crit rate, the crit damage, since this build has a lot of skills that guarantee crit hit. Let me go over to the priority of the engravings. So if you have only 2 of level 3 engravings, then do it like this: Grudge and Climax. And if you have 3 of level 3 engravings, the third one will be Keen Blunt Weapon, like this. And if you're going for the 4th one, then as I told you before, that would be Cursed Doll. But there's something to tell you guys about this. The moment where you start to get the relic accessories and build the engravings like this will be level 14, 15, which is the level where when you can enter the first Legion raid, Vulcan normal. And in Vulcan, I mean, like all the Legion raid, including Vulcan, like it takes long, which means like especially for beginners, you will suffer from lack of potion. Like if you go both of the Grudge and Cursed Doll, you see the point here, right? Because you get like double penalty from it that directly affects the potion. So for me, if you want to focus on surviving, then I would recommend this one, the mass increase, instead of going for the cursed doll. So idealistically, I guess this is the best engraving set for going 4 of level 3 engravings for those beginners who are starting the Legion raid. Then let me wrap up the first engraving build by showing you guys the skill cycle. The second engraving set is also for a Climax class engraving, but distribution of crit and specialization without any swiftness. The best engraving set for this build is Grudge, Keen Blunt Weapon, Cursed Doll, Climax, and All-Out Attack. As I mentioned in the previous video, the reason going for this set is to select the tripod that amplifies the damage instead of going for the guaranteed crit when it comes to the red skills. So that's the reason why you need like lots of crit like this. And if you see the skills, there are like lots of skills for this build that requires holding skills. So that's the reason why you want to go for all-out attack engraving, because if you see the description, it literally says that it increases the casting or holding speed by 20%, and it also increases the damage by 20%, which is a lot. There are 4 skills that can benefit from all-out attacks, which means there are 4 holding skills. And let me show you like what they are. The first one is this skill. The second one is this poking skill. And third one is rushing skill. And lastly, the fourth one is the awakening. The second awakening is a holding skill. The relic gear set you want to go for this build is called illusion set, which increases your damage and crit rate as well. And for the Argos set, you should go for the set that increases crit rate, not the crit damage. It's totally different from the first build. You have to go for the crit rate increase set. When it comes to the priority, to be honest, if you really want to do this build, then you should start from at least having 3 of level 3, Grudge and Climax and All Out Attack. And All Out Attack is really important in this build because you can see that there's no swiftness, which means like it's unstable. Like you get hit by the attack a lot if you have 0 swiftness. And all out attack increases the holding speed by 20%, which is huge for a character that doesn't have swiftness. So that's the reason why you need all out attack. And with that being said, I really recommend you guys to go for the first build that I described before, rather than going for this second build, because that one has swiftness as substat, and also its red skills guarantee crits, right? So it's much more stable when it comes to damaging and also when it comes to survival. Then let me wrap up the second build by showing you the skill cycle. The last engraving set is for moderation class engraving with stat distribution of crit and swiftness. The best engraving set for this build is Grudge, Keen Blunt Weapon, Cursed Doll, Moderation, and Adrenaline. Instead of going for Adrenaline for 5th engraving, you can also go for Ambush Master, which is this one here. It says it allows you to have 25% of damage increase if you attack in back attack. Of course, you have to do it with skills that has back attack. But for me, if I try to recommend you guys, I would prefer like Adrenaline over the Ambush Master, because Ambush Master requires you to be well positioned. You have to always, stay in the backside of the mob, which is not easy when you go into the Legion raid. And Adrenaline really fits the moderation skill set, because if you see here, Adrenaline is like stacking engraving, right? Like you have to stack 6 times, then it gets the 15% of crit buff and 6% of attack as well. But if you see here, it goes like high swiftness. Moderation goes for high swiftness, which means you have like low cooldown for all of the skills here, and that means it's easy to stack up the adrenaline. And having adrenaline means you don't need to go for high crit, so you can also even lower the crit rate from here and increase the swiftness as that much. For the gear set, the relic gear set, you want to go for the nightmare, the same as the first build. And for Argos set, you want to go for the build that gives you crit rate. And when it comes to the priority, this is also tricky. You know what? Like the second build from the Climax, I don't recommend this if you have like 2 or 3 engravings. I like for this one, you have to at least start from 3 or 4, because I mean you can do it by having like 2 or 3 engravings, but the reason why I'm not recommending for both of the skill set, the second build from the Climax and this moderation one, is because that the first build that I introduced you guys, the one from the Climax with no crit and guaranteed crit skills, that's overpowered when having like less engravings, because basically, having less engraving means you are like not strong, right? You're weak. But that build has skills that guarantee hits, so it literally does more damage compared to other classes by when having less engravings. So honestly, it's overpowered for the first build. So I recommend you guys to go for first build if possible, instead of going for moderation or that crit specialization climax. And if you become affordable, like having like 5/3 level engravings, then you might like switch over for fun, I guess. Then let me wrap up the moderation as well by showing you guys the skill cycle. Remember that moderation doesn't have red stance. For the gem, Lancemaster is a class that uses lots of skills purely for DPS. The only skill that does not do DPS as a mastered level is this one that gives synergy. So you literally need to build your gems for all the skills as equally as possible, which means it's a class that needs lots of gold to be spent, unlike Destroyer. If you see my Lancemaster here, I try to build high level gem as possible for all of the skills I'm using. And of course it's not easy to do it, but you will eventually get it if you just take your time. For the card set, there's not much to cover, honestly. It's same, for all of the classes except support. The best one is Light Salvation here, with 18 Awakening to get this 7% damage buff. If you don't have this card set with 18 Awakening, then the next one you should go for is the Lost Wind Cliff, this one, which gives you 7% crit rate when you have 12 Awakening. And if you even don't have this one, then that's still okay, because like this is not just for Lancemaster. For all of the DPS classes, if you don't have both of these card set, then you can just go for any other card set as well, because it really doesn't matter if it's not these two. Well, that's all for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and please hit the subscribe if you liked it. Thanks for watching, and I really appreciate sparing your time. Then see you guys on the next video. Bye bye.